Hey guys, welcome back to another video. It's been a while, but I'm finally back. So today we're just going to be looking at some nationalism in Europe, multiple choice questions. So these are some basic questions that I picked up off the internet, and we'll be solving 30 questions in this video. And I'll be giving you the answer for each question and also giving a brief explanation. So without any further ado, let's begin. When did the French Revolution start? So obviously the answer is 1789 because the storming of Bastille took place in 1789, and this event sort of kick-started the entire revolution. What was the political situation in France at the time? Democracy, no. Republic, absolutely not. Sovereign state, no. And the answer is absolute monarchy. And the monarch is King Louis XVI. What emphasized the notion of a united community enjoying equal rights under a constitution? So if you look back at the textbook, you know that the answer would be A, because there was these terms, they coined these terms like la patrie and la citoyen, which emphasized the notion of a united community. And these, although they had different meanings of nationalism, for example, the French flag was replacing the royal standard, and the idea of one nation state, these aren't exactly related to what the question is asking. What emphasized the notion of a united community? The answer is these two terms that they coined. How many colors did the new French flag have? You know, it's a tricolor, red, blue, and white. Similar to the US colors. By whom was the Estates General elected? So the Estates General was elected by active citizens, which were basically top-tier citizens that, in its top-tier bracket, that owned land. So not common men and women, no women at all, really. And no senior citizens either. It was only active citizens who were a group of men that owned property. Next, what was the name of the new Estates General? So the Estates General was changed to the National Assembly after the French Revolution. What actions were taken in the name of the nation? Army was formed, social work was done, hymns were composed, oaths taken, and martyrs commemorated, customs duty were abolished, regular meetings were held. So obviously the answer is C because the other options don't have any correlation with the question. In the name of the nation, this is what happened. This could have taken place at any time, whether it be a monarchy or a democracy or a nation or a modern state. But this is particular to the question. So an easy hack for any multiple choice question is finding the odd one out. Especially for questions like these where obviously this is the longest option, but don't go for that. But the main part here is that what actions were taken in the name of the nation. So obviously in the textbook we see that in the name of the nation, they changed the name of the Estates General, it became the National Assembly with the Constitution. And they replaced the Royal Standard with the tricolor. They created these new terms called la patrie and la citoyen. And obviously these basically aggregates all of that. So, next question. What type of an administrative system was set up? So federal administrative system, centralized, regional, or decentralized. So federalism didn't exist at that time, and neither the regional administrative system was what happened before the nation state was formed. And it wasn't decentralized yet, so the answer is centralized administrative system. So to help you out, I'll tell you where you can find the answer in the textbook to each of these questions. This would be in section 1 about the French Revolution, all of these questions. And this is in the next page about Napoleon's reforms. So next question. Regional dialects were discouraged and blank became the common language of the nation. English, Polish, French, Italian. So obviously if we're talking about the French Revolution, then the answer is the language of French. Because French was also spoken in Paris, which was the capital. What mission did the revolutionaries declare as the destiny to the French people? So the French people believed that after they became a nation, they believed that it was their destiny, similar to the USA's manifest destiny, to liberate the other countries of Europe, which is why they sent the French army. Which is why Napoleon exploited the territory, because there was a common belief that it was the French destiny to liberate the people of Europe. The other answers, at this point, France was already a nation state. It already became a democracy, and it was already sovereign. So the mission of the French revolutionaries, their destiny was to liberate the people of Europe from despotism, which is another word for absolute rule, absolute monarchy, absolutism, etc. Next question. What happened when the news of the events of France reached the different cities of Europe? There was tumult. The people didn't know how to react. Students and other members of educated middle classes began setting up Jacobin clubs, and there was confusion and dissatisfaction in the air. So this is one of those questions where even if you don't know the concept, you can use the logic and you can find the odd one out. So 3 of these options show that there was some sort of frustration. They didn't know what to do, lack of knowledge, anger, frustration, lack of knowledge, or it's just straight up confusion. So that's A, B, and C. They're the similar terms. So the answer is obviously C. Just based on logic. A lot of MCQs can be solved on pure logic, and I highly suggest going into the term 1 exam with a logical mindset. Especially for these type of questions. Even if you don't know the concept, based on the options, you can easily determine the answer. So stay cool-headed and just think of logic. Logic is always the answer. So next, what was the purpose of the Jacobin clubs? To demoralize the people to speak against France, to socialize among different races. Again, same logic can apply here. Demoralize, speak against, socialize among different races. The only one that makes sense here is to hold activities and campaigns. And we even remember from last year, in 9th grade, in the French Revolution, we already read about the Jacobin clubs. And we know that they held activities, campaigns, and promoted equality. So obviously the answer is option C. What was the result of the activities and campaigns held at the Jacobin clubs? Prepared the way for French armies to move to different countries, fought unrest, crime, and destruction, immediate peace. So if we recall in the textbook, it said that after the French people decided that it was their destiny to liberate the people of Europe, then Napoleon started moving the French army forward to Holland, Belgium, Switzerland. So obviously the answer is option A. And the campaigns and the Jacobin clubs prepared the way for the French armies, because the Jacobin clubs began to promote the idea of nations, and they began narrating the stories of France, and just created the perfect opportunity for the French army to move in. So next, which countries did the French armies move into? So this is a straight up textbook answer, which you have to know. Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy. What idea did the French armies carry abroad through the Revolutionary Wars? This is obviously a simple answer. You can also use your logic here. Despotism, nationalism, war strategies, violence, and bloodshed. Again, odd one out, nationalism. And obviously the entire chapter is about nationalism. The French armies, they want to carry abroad the idea of nationalism, so the answer is B, nationalism. So next, what did Napoleon do in the territory that was under his control? He introduced many reforms, set about war strategies, worked for peace, worked towards democratic ideas. So obviously, we know that it's not war strategies, it's not peace, and it's not democratic ideas either, because in the textbook it clearly said that Napoleon's entrance in these territories meant the end of democracy. In fact, the exact sentence was, the entrance of Napoleon was no doubt the end of democracy in France and these other territories. But he did introduce various reforms through the Napoleonic Code, or the Civic Code of 1805. What type of rule was carried out in France during Napoleon's time? So exactly, in the textbook it said, Napoleon's entrance meant no doubt a return to monarchy, destruction of democracy. And in this case, rather than King Louis XVI, the new monarch was Napoleon. Again, the exact sentence, Napoleon had no doubt destroyed democracy in France. These questions are practically the same and they're just worded different. What did Napoleon do to make the system efficient and rational in France? In the administrative field, he had incorporated revolutionary principles, brought about different reforms, worked on military, worked on the financial conditions. So he brought several administrative reforms, no political reforms that were beneficial. He brought both political, social, and administrative reforms, but only the administrative reforms were truly revolutionary and beneficial. The political reforms were stifling, and they blocked freedom of the press and censorship, and the economic reforms were beneficial, but the social reforms were also highly beneficial. But none of the options talk about social or political, they only talk about administrative field. And while you may be thinking that option B could be correct, it's not specific enough, especially when we have a more specific answer like option A. So the next question is, what was the Civic Code? That should be Civic Code. What was the Civic Code of 1804, also known as? So as I mentioned earlier, this was Napoleon's code that he formulated. So it was formally or informally known as the Napoleonic Code. What did the Civic Code of 1804 bring about? Right by birth to all facilities of state, did away with privileges based on birth, established equality before the law, and secured right to property, no right to property, no right to equality. So again, you can use your odd one out strategy here. Right by birth to facilities of state. Napoleon strictly went against the rights by birth because he believed that everyone should work towards their own future rather than being granted with all their privileges at birth. No right to property, the Civic Code of 1804 stressed the inviolability. Please remember this word. It stressed the inviolability, inviolability. Inviolability, that means it cannot be violated. The inviolability of right to property, because the middle class, educated middle class that was rising, really needed the right to property, which was only formerly only in the hands of the feudal lords. And no right to equality. Napoleon also stressed the right to equality. He freed the serfs and bonded slaves, abolished rights of birth, and also promoted equality under the law. So this question is talking about the social reforms of the Civic Code of 1804. And remember, as I mentioned earlier, the Civic Code was beneficial in the administrative field, social field, but not so much politically. Which regions was the Civic Code exported to? This is another one of those textbook questions. Dutch Republic, Switzerland, Italy, and Germany. What did Napoleon do in the rural areas of these regions? So rural areas, specifically, simplified administrative divisions, abolished the feudal system, and freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues, made administration strict, encouraged the feudal system, and put taxes on the peasants. So in the rural areas, they suffered a lot in the past under the monarch, due to serfdom, manorial dues, the feudal system. But Napoleon did away with all of these and created a much more equal life for peasants. And in the towns, so we talked about rural areas, the villages, and now let's talk about the towns. So guild restrictions were removed, transport communication systems improved, etc., etc. Transport communication systems were improved. Peasants, artisans, and workers and new businessmen had to pay tax. Guild restrictions remained as the way they were. This is one of those like straight out of the textbook question. And you may be saying that B is also correct, but again, B is one of the changes, but this asks for all the changes, and this was perfectly articulated in this option A right here. Question 25. In mid-18th century, what was the status of Germany, Italy, and Switzerland? They were sovereign states, they were democracies, they were republics. This entire lesson is about how modern states or monarchies, absolute institutions, turn into nations. And so in the mid-18th century, this was the status. They were divided into kingdoms, duchies, and cantons, whose rulers had their autonomous territory. So Germany, Italy, and Switzerland, at this point, they were modern states, but their transition to becoming a nation state was beginning. When did Napoleon invade Italy? The answer is 1797. You can have to use a bit of logic here because we know that the storming of Bastille or the French Revolution began in 1789, and Napoleon invaded after the storming of Bastille, meaning after 1789. So the answer has to be 1797, option B, because everything else is before 1789. Which territories were included under the Habsburg Empire? We have the Alpine regions, Tyrol, Australia, Sudetenland, Bohemia, Lombardy, Venetia, Netherlands. Textbook question, option A right here. 28. When did industrialization take place in France and parts of the German states? This is one of those dates that you really have to remember, and the answer is the 19th century. Because remember, in terms of centuries, 19th century means the 1800s to 1899. So, that's when industrialization started taking place in Europe in general. What is liberalism? Another textbook question. Liberalism derives from the Latin liber, meaning free, freedom from the individual, end of autocracy, equal liberty to all classes. So all of these are correct, but the most appropriate option is A because it clearly defines liberalism and also includes the basic aspects. So last question for today, what is suffrage? This is one of those vocabulary words that you have in your little vocab boxes or new words boxes. Remember, suffrage is the right to vote, always. Universal adult franchise, suffrage, these all refer to voting. So guys, that concludes this little MCQ session that I held. And if you want me to do more MCQs on this lesson or any other lesson in particular, then just leave your comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video to your friends who might find this useful as well. And until the next video, this is Nisha Tube signing off. Peace.